Hello dear ladies and gentlemen, and in this video I'm gonna show you a crucial game of last 9th round of Sinquefield Cup that took place in United States of America in state of Missouri. And young Nepomniachtchi, perhaps next future world chess champion, faced 19-year-old American chess prodigy HANS Niemann. And how ended this game? Managed HANS Niemann to win last game against Jan, you will see in this video recap. And before the last round, you can see the tournament table, current standings, and Fabiano Caruana, Alfredo Ferrugia, and Jan Nepomniachtchi. These three participants were tied for first place, but the main problem is that Fabiano Caruana had to face in the last round Magnus Carlsen, but Magnus withdrew from this tournament, so Fabiano gets nothing for this win, and so Alfredo Ferrugia and Jan Nepomniachtchi, these both participants were fighting for the gold of this tournament. And Alfredo Ferrugia very fast finished his game against Maxim Telegraph in draw. So if Jan Nepomniachtchi wins this game, he totally wins tournament. And Jan Nepomniachtchi started this game with English opening, c2 went to c4, and Jan responded with central move e7 to e5, knight went to c3, and here HANS Niemann spent already approximately 7 minutes on move number 2, and he played bishop b4 eventually, knight d5. And here if we speak about some continuations from black side, here black has move a5, bishop e7, bishop c5. These three lines are main continuations, and here HANS responds with bishop e7, d4, exchange, and now pawn on g7 is under attack, and so HANS played in this position knight to f6, attacking white's knight in the center, and here Jan took a dark square bishop and played bishop g5, simply pinning his opponent's knight on f6. Knight c6, queen went to c3. Why Jan Nepomniachtchi responds with this move? Because queen on c3 also making a pressure on this knight on f6 square, and here HANS played d6, knight went to f3, bishop e6, and here on move number 10 Jan Nepomniachtchi surprised his opponent with the novelty. This g3 move was never played in classical chess, also in online. G3. The main continuation was to play e3, and only 5 games in chess mega database was played with such a move e3, and for example, after long castle, bishop e2, rook hg8, h6. Here in almost every line black is slight worse, but really here also is some theory. But Jan played g3, h6, and Jan Nepomniachtchi, I guess that he was really happy to get some endgame on the board, because here, for example, after knight d2 move, if we talk about pawn structure, here on king side, HANS Niemann is in really big trouble, because his pawn structure is fractured, but here HANS Niemann tried to push his pawn in the center, d5. Here Nepo could have take a pawn on d5, and after pawn exchange he could play e4 and bishop e6, bishop b5, but he simply wanted to provoke his opponent to take a pawn on c4, and the HANS take this pawn eventually, and here Nepo simply exchanged light pieces and went to long castle. And here we can see that HANS Niemann was playing with an extra pawn, but the pawn fractured is really is really messy, and here extra pawn was on the board, but all these 7 pawns, 7 black pawns are simply weak, and they really here from a human point of view Hans had a really terrible position, but here I really liked Hans' idea to play c3. He sacrifices a pawn and simply he weakens also Jan's pawn structure. King c2, rook h b8, rook b1. Here Hans also could take pawn on a2, but the main problem is that after c4 and rook a1, here is no any possibilities to return with this light square bishop. But here Hans played rook h to b8 square, rook b1, rook b6, c4, rook a6, and now Hans simply was attacking a pawn on a2, rook b2, and rook g8. Here, if we speak about the position's evaluation, I can say the position is stably better for white because a better pawn structure, also weakened b7 square, but now it's impossible to Jan to go to the square because the pawn on a2 is hanging simply. But here Jan simply took a advantage on the king side with h4 move, simply to prevent idea to play rook g5 with an idea simply to maneuver to c5 square, taking c4 pawn. Rook went to a4, king simply defensed, rook g4, and king b3 attacking opponent's rook. Rook moved backwards, and rook c2 defending c4 pawn. Check, king c3, rook c5. Hans Niemann simply attacks his opponent c4 pawn, king went to b2 square, and rook e5. It was kind of inaccuracy from Hans' side. The better move was to play simply rook a5, controlling this a2 pawn, but rook a5 was played, and here rook f5, pawn is under pressure, rook f1, and here Hans Niemann made a terrible mistake. After move rook g8, here Jan Nepomniachtchi, after precise knight b3 move, he had here really big chances for the win, because here pawn on c4 is no more under unpleasant pressure, and here the main problem is that after some c5 move rook e1, and simply after unprecise move from black side rook b8, after f4 simply black could have resigned this position, because here after e4 and after rook h5, here white simply could have played with extra rook, because here is no any future for black to get into the play with this such a terrible rook. But here Jan Nepomniachtchi, in his favor, he always plays so fast. He simply misevaluated this idea, and simply maybe he didn't see. He played king c3, rook went to a5, rook b1, rook g4. Despite of his missing idea to play knight b3, white's position is much better, because here white rook now is really active on b7 square. King went to d7 simply with the idea to defend pawn on c7, rook b8 with an idea to move with rook to h8 square, simply taking a pawn on king side. Rook a3. It was such a big mistake from Hans' side. It's really difficult to defend this position, because here no any active moves for black, and really some pathetic position for black. And here rook a3, king b2, rook a6, and rook h8. Here Jan Nepomniachtchi deprived rook g6 move with an idea simply to play h5, and after rook's move, simply pawn is under attack. So here correctly that Hans didn't defend his pawn. He played rook a4, attacking opponent's pawn. But here Jan also made an inaccuracy. And here he simply could have taken pawn on h6, and I don't know, and simply I have no idea why Jan simply didn't take this pawn. For instance, that after king e7 move defending a pawn, rook h8, and here if even black takes a pawn on c4, and after rook exchanges, after rook exchange and after rook b7 moves, the position is terrible. Pawn structure, white on king side is simply greatest that I have ever seen, and really here position is almost already strategically lost for black. But here Jan simply played a3, f5. Also Jan could take a pawn on h6, and he simply had to do it, but he played rook c3. With the idea simply maybe in the future to get into the 8th rank. King e7, rook b8. I don't especially know why Jan Nepomniachtchi didn't take the pawn. Maybe he was afraid of move rook g8, and here is not so easy to get with this white rook back to the battle, but here was the e4 idea, and after pawn exchange in the center, and here it's not possible to take a pawn, because here after rook sacrifice, rook on c4 is no more under defense. But here maybe after e4 Jan Nepomniachtchi didn't like an idea to play f4 for Hans side, but here after pawn capture, here white has really a pleasant position. Okay, but here Jan Nepomniachtchi was afraid, have a guess, and he played rook b8, rook a6, or king c2, rook b6. Here opponent simply repeated last moves, because it was move number 40, and simply Jan and Hans wanted to get more time on the clock, and rook a6, king c2, bishop d7. Also a logical idea from Hans side. He wants to better his light square bishop and to get to the light square diagonal, where light square bishop could simply could have great control under these light squares, but king b2, bishop e6, rook h8, rook d6. Here knight is under attack, king c8, king c1, and bishop d7, defending a pawn on h6, and here knight b3. It is a critical moment in this game. Also Jan Nepomniachtchi could have a good play after rook a8 move, and after rook a6, rook b3, simply with an idea to get into 8th rank and play in the future maybe rook b8 with an idea to attack a pawn on h6. But for instance, after bishop c6, rook h8, rook c8, king d7, rook b8, and black's positions is really unpleasant. And here simply Jan played knight b3, and after very precise move bishop a4, now Hans threatens with light pieces exchange, and then taking a pawn on c4, and the game ended by this 3-time position repetition. And here, for instance, if white simply declined a draw, and after rook exchange, white could have really simply lost. And here game ended by draw, and Hans Niemann simply save this game and simply end this tournament with no loss in the last round. So it's really a big success for Hans Niemann, and he ended this tournament in result of 4 points out of 8, but really if you count also his won against Magnus, so it's his result +1 in this tournament. It is really such a great achievement and a great success. So we congratulate Hans, and simply it is really sad for Jan Nepomniachtchi that he simply didn't manage to win this kind of position. You were on Max's channel, and in the next video you will see a tie break between Alireza Firouzja and Jan Nepomniachtchi, tie break for the 4th place in Sinquefield Cup, because Alireza and Jan, they scored equal amount of points, and they played a special tiebreak consisted of 2 rapid chess games. And see you soon.